Ready? Good morning. This is State of the Arts NYC, and this is your host, Savona Bailey-McClain. Today, we have a very special filmmaker in our studio today. We have Andreas Caballero.
That's right.
Who is joining us today with his publicist, Brian. And they are going to be talking with us about his new documentary, The Interpreters. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining us with us today, Andreas. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having us, Savannah.
You're welcome. And so we're going to now just introduce him a little bit to our audience. Andreas, he's 32 years old, and he is a producer. He's done a lot of producing for NPR. And several programs, in fact, for NPR. He also used to be a producer for StoryCorps, correct? And it was with StoryCorps that he decided to do some coverage. It started with Military Voices, and then it blossomed from Military Voices to something far more in-depth. Now, his documentary, which is going to premiere on Tuesday, November 13th, as a part of Doc NYC, is going to focus on Iraqi and Afghan interpreters who helped U.S. military forces as they were dealing with, the Taliban and other insurgency groups. And so he's going to share with us how did this really, evolved from his first series so that we can learn more about this issue, because it's kind of a heartbreaking issue about these interpreters who've served us but now are having trouble entering our country as, really patriots in many ways, and how they're being threatened and their families are being threatened by the various people they were helping us fight. So, Andreas, thank you for coming into the studio, first of all.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Great. So tell us now, how did this all begin for you?
So, as you mentioned, I was producing a story, actually a series called the Military Voices Initiative for StoryCorps, which airs on National Public Radio, and it's also one of the largest archives of human voices in the country. And so I came across this story of one of our characters in the film. His pseudonym is Philip Morris. They gave him pseudonyms because they wanted to protect their identities on the battlefield. And it was about his friendship with Sergeant Paul Braun from Minnesota. And that piece that I did for StoryCorps sort of evolved into another idea, which was to do a feature-length documentary about interpreters. But we knew that it couldn't just be a success story like the one of Philip and Paul. Paul, the soldier who moves mountains to get the interpreter he worked with in Iraq to safety in the United States. The reality was that there were thousands and thousands of other interpreters, perhaps most of the interpreters who work with U.S. forces, a total of about 50,000 or so, are still, only a handful were able to make it to safety. Most of them were still outside waiting for their visas they were promised, in hiding. Many had left as refugees to Europe.
This is, becoming a consistent problem in our country, that we are kind of failing these various people who have this particular view about America being the home of the brave and the free, but it's really a country that's kind of using people to benefit our politics or our philosophy, or really for corporations so they can, penetrate markets. And then these people who sacrifice their lives and their families' lives are just left behind, being told to fill out a form. I mean, that's almost ridiculous, Fill out a form and we'll get to you whenever we get to you, and hopefully you'll still be alive when, we find the time to get to you.
Yeah, I think when a country decides to invade another by force, I don't think the people who actually make these decisions really understand or take into account.
Or care.
Right, the complexity and the power of the impact that can have on people's lives, and it's a ripple effect, right? The interpreters are just one of these groups of people who are suffering the consequences of this decision to go to war. Now, we could have that conversation about whether or not it was a good idea to enter these wars. I think many documentaries have been done specifically analyzing that. What we wanted to focus on more was this group of interpreters, these people who believed that took our word, that we were going there to improve the situation in their countries, to make things better. And in the end, when you look back, the wars are still happening, and with tragic results. Refugees who have had to leave and fleeing violence, or also the economic downturns that these countries are experiencing now. And so we focus on how this group of people, interpreters and their families, how they're trying to rebuild their lives.
This is so sad because this is not about immigration. And I know you've covered immigration as well, correct?
Yeah.
But isn't this all turning into a refugee crisis, not an immigration problem?
Yeah, and you could argue that, that is linked to immigration. Some have talked about involuntary migration rather than voluntary. In this case, it's urgent. These people gave up the right to live in their own country for believing in the cause that even more than many of our soldiers did. And now they're facing these consequences. And when they were promised visas as part of this program that was designed to get them to safety, called the Special Immigrant Visa Program, and the program is not functioning the way that it's supposed to.
Right.
By law, it's supposed to take 9 months for these interpreters to get to safety, to get a visa. And in reality, it's taking an average of 4 years or more.
Wow.
Some of the guys we filmed with have been waiting for 4 to 10 years, which is unacceptable, and it raises this question of the moral responsibility that we have as a country to these people who believed in our mission more than we did.
And really, our show is about the arts. It's not about politics. But the arts is being used to help shape this debate, because it really is a debate about how we should treat people, how we should even view people in the first place. And tell us, how did you shape this sort of important story by using film and audio to, get this across to all of us?
Sure. So the challenge was, going into the film, when we were beginning, we had already missed a big chunk of our main character's narrative. So we had to think of ways to kind of fill that gap and still be able to tell the story, and at the same time make sure we were able to follow him. The main character in our film, Philip Morris, he had already come to safety, but he had to go back to bring his family, to do his family's paperwork, which took, it had to go through the bureaucracy and the lengthy process. So anyways, from a filmmaking standpoint, we ended up using, it is somewhat of a conventional approach. We have sit-down interviews, but we decided to really do this from the perspective of interpreters themselves, rather than all these talking heads or politicians. We had interviews with, senators like McCain, who were at the forefront of this issue. That didn't make it on the cut. We really stuck to the interpreters themselves. We wanted people to feel kind of, what it is like to wait in limbo.
So did you walk with them in these countries? Which countries?
Yeah, so we went to Afghanistan. We were there for about a month. and we met with many interpreters. And a lot of the challenges as well was we had to film indoors. They were in hiding. We couldn't, attract attention. One of them was moving houses every other week because of, the threats against him and his family. And so we also used, we gave one of them a camera. When Philip Morris went back to get his family, he had to go through areas that were controlled by ISIS, and so we had to give him cameras without playback, capability, so that for his safety, and think all these things out. So in the end, the movie ends up being a combination of archival footage, also our own, highly produced footage, and then also cell phone footage. From these interpreters. So that the challenge was really how are we going to have these elements come together aesthetically, and in the end we think we were able to make that happen in order to get and interweave all these three different stories, which in the edit room, which was also a challenging process because the locations are different. We have Iraq, Afghanistan, Minnesota, New York. So that was definitely a challenge, but we had great editors working with us, Francisco Bello and Fabian Caballero, who help us interweave the stories.
So you want people to feel an urgency, correct?
Yes.
And that we should be more caring about these people who sacrifice their lives, and that they're really patriots, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, it's important. I think we're living in a time where there's so much that's going on that people are forgetting about these two wars, and the impact that it's still having on people's lives today, interpreters being one group of them. The bigger picture being, there are a lot of refugees. Yeah. This is more than about interpreters. There are a lot of people who have fled war, and
still are.
And we are not we're not moving things fast enough. In fact, we're closing our doors. Just for interpreters themselves, in the past year, or since the last election, the granting of special immigrant visas for interpreters and other refugees has decreased dramatically. There have been systems in place that are slowing down the process with extreme vetting rather than actually speeding it up. And in the meantime, people are dying.
What do you think? Because, we all hear the rhetoric every day from our nation's capital, and it's very sad to hear some of this rhetoric because it seems like our new president doesn't seem to empathize with anyone that may be of color, because these people are, you're talking about a mixture of people who are Asian, who might believe in Islam, who might believe in Buddhism, and they have different, color hues, and folks have this stereotype about these people from Afghanistan, which is really an Asian country. And tell us what has been your experience with these people, because I don't think they understand the people, and I think you've had now time to spend with these people. And what do you want people in our country to understand about these folks?
Yeah, I think, going back to the very toxic rhetoric that we've been hearing around immigration, there's always this, history shows all the examples when immigrants have been scapegoated for whatever reasons, and that's what's happening today. Again, perhaps in a more pronounced way, and the fact is that these interpreters, like many other immigrants who are fleeing violence, war or economic hardship, they're trying to find a better day, and we're making it harder. We're demonizing them. I think that when you actually, we were able to capture the way that the stories of these interpreters from Afghanistan, from Iraq, particularly to Philip Morris, I think by watching this, you can see the way that he integrates to society. He has 2 or 3 jobs. He's trying to do the right things. He's trying to improve his financial situation for him, for his family. So it is quite different. The reality that is that the contribution that the immigrants bring, not just economically but culturally, to our society is far different than what it looks like when you watch these politicians and listen to their rhetoric.
And talk about that culturally, because a lot of people don't realize that many of these folks, they have very close-knit families, and they really care about each other deeply. And that sense of family is so beautiful to watch at times, and I think sometimes we're missing that in this country, that sense of family where people really like and care about each other, and they share their gifts and talents. Can you elaborate a little bit? Were you able to witness some of this?
Absolutely, yeah. Just the fact is that this community, they support each other. Muslim American community, like many others in the U.S. And in the same way, I think just the fact that they have gone through everything they've gone through to get here, I think that is a sign of how much they care about their families. If the life lottery would have been different for us, and we were in their shoes, then we would also do our best to get our families out of there and bring them with us to this country. And so they, in the process, sometimes you lose. There are tragic stories, and I couldn't fathom being in their position, and I'm doing everything for my family, and then having the doors close of the country that I actually helped at one point. And so yes, when they arrive, the communities are amazing, highly philanthropic, and they do really care about family, and that comes off when you spend time with them.
Okay, and when I hear their stories, now it mirrors other stories from people coming from Central and South America, because now you're hearing about the migrants who are coming across Central America and South America to come to our borders, into the thousands of people. Or you have those who are fleeing on boats, from Haiti, or those coming from Africa, risking their lives to get to Europe. These stories, they're pretty much all the same, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you could draw that parallel. I think interpreters are just one group that we focus on in this film, but the ripple effects of what's other things that are happening, especially when you look back into U.S. policy in different parts of the world, you will often find a link that is the cause of a reaction. And in the end, at the end of the day, everybody who's trying to come here, there is a reason, and it's a reaction that it should make us look towards the root causes of what it is that we're doing or not doing. That is, and whatever that is, are we making things better or worse for them?
Right, and I think that's the real benefit of looking at documentaries, just looking at it as an art form. It allows you that moment to see something that you may not see on, national network news, and you get to hear voices you would not otherwise get a chance to hear, and then you can feel, as opposed to just being spoon-fed what somebody else wants you to understand. And there was a lot of risk that you took as well, and your crew, correct, to tell this story?
Yeah, and we had to go. We went to Afghanistan. There were a lot of logistics involved because the situation, security-wise, is getting worse by the day. Even 2 years ago, from when we were there last till now, things have gone really, really bad. I have some colleagues, some journalists who have just arrived from there, and it's quite different. So sure, there was a risk, but I wouldn't even compare it to the risk that this group of people who we were following are taking, and just to get to safety.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming and sharing with us your story, how you made this film. And this is the first time you're going to be in Doc NYC, correct?
Yep, this is the first time. It's our second film with my co-director, Sofian Khan, who also shot the film. But it's our first one that we get to show at Doc NYC, and we're really excited about it.
You should be, because Doc NYC has become a real popular film festival. I mean, very quickly. And that's because of the quality of the documentaries that they are presenting. I have to give it to IFC. They really have done a magnificent job in putting together this film festival that has actually grown over the years very quickly. Great reputation, highly sought after. I know New Yorkers love their panel discussions, but what's starting to happen is that New Yorkers are liking these documentaries too. And they feel that this is giving you a real truth that we would not, normally get to experience. And I just saw a screening yesterday for another film that I'm hoping to meet the subject of that particular documentary. So I think this is great that you are a young person who is, out there giving great, stories for us to listen to, and that we can share that with our various audiences and encourage them to go out and to see this documentary. So tell us again, when is your documentary going to premiere?
Sure. So the main screening is going to be at the IFC in Manhattan, New York.
That's the one on West 3rd Street.
That's right.
Great.
And it's going to be on the 13th. Which is a Tuesday.
Of November.
November the 13th, which is a Tuesday, I believe around 5:30 p.m.
This is great. So folks can go to the website, to IFC or Doc NYC, and then they can go and, if they're interested, they can sign up and register to see this film festival. All right. So thank you so much, Andreas, for joining us. It was a pleasure getting a chance to meet you, and we wish you all the very best.
Thanks so much for having us on the show.
All right. And so here we are. We're about to end our segment, and we hope that all of our audience will pay attention, support Andreas and his documentary, The Interpreters.